Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. So another day and another popular open source project announcing its retirement. So we have previously seen Ingress Nginx controller announced its retirement because of lack of open source contributors. And now same thing is with Kubernetes Dashboard as well. So Kubernetes Dashboard UI is a very popular project. In fact, a lot of people who get started with Kubernetes, they use the Kubernetes dashboard to understand the architecture of Kubernetes, the components that they installed on the Kubernetes cluster. Typically, it's the most easiest way to understand the different components of Kubernetes. Now, even the project has announced its retirement. Now, before I walk through what exactly happened, what are the alternatives, let me take 2 minutes here to talk something interesting about open source. A lot of times I get this question, Abhishek, how do I contribute to open source? Because I have a long history of open source contributions, people ask me this question, but even otherwise, I see a lot of people talking about open source on LinkedIn, a lot of young talent want to contribute to open source, but the reality is that open source projects are finding it difficult to get the maintainers. What is the reason? Because people are looking at open source as opportunity to get a new job. A lot of times people want to contribute to open source because they get the visibility, and with the visibility they can show that experience in the resume and they can switch to a different project. Trust me, this is not how open source projects can survive. For open source projects to survive, they need active maintainers. In fact, they need contributors day in, day out who look at the project, who look at the issues of the project, and who can provide the direction to the project. Even we face the same issue when I was actively maintaining Argo CD operator, Argo rollouts operator. We were hardly 2 to 3 maintainers and hundreds of issues flooding into the project. Of course, as I told you, there are people who occasionally show interest in the project, but they don't take ownership of the project. If this goes on, we might have to see a lot of popular open source projects announcing their retirement. So please, if you have interest in open source, dedicate your 1 to 2 hours every day, contribute to the project, look at the project, and start maintaining the project. Just like how you work as an employee in a company. If you work as an employee in a company, you take the ownership of a module and you will be responsible for the module. If you can't respond to the issues immediately, at least you take some time, you get back to the question and you respond to the module. In the same way, you also enhance the module. Now, this is a kind request from the channel. If you take open source, take it seriously. Now, let's see what happened to Kubernetes Dashboard UI. Okay, I'm pretty sure a lot of you must have used Kubernetes Dashboard, but just to set the context, Kubernetes Dashboard is a web user interface. That is, if you set up Kubernetes Dashboard for your cluster, you can start visualizing your cluster. That is, you can start seeing the pods that are running, nodes that are attached to your cluster. Even to some extent, you can see the observability details. Something like the CPU utilization, memory utilization, logs of your pods, and any issues with running Kubernetes pods. And reason why this became very popular is because it made Kubernetes simple for the beginners. Let me explain. A lot of times people get started with Kubernetes, but they find Kubernetes overwhelming because of the kubectl commands. To check the logs of the pod, to see the status of the pods, or maybe to check IP address of the service and any other use case on Kubernetes, they should know the kubectl commands. Either they have to remember the commands or they have to browse the commands through the internet. Now, Kubernetes Dashboard UI eliminated this problem. All that beginners have to do is to set up Dashboard UI for the cluster and start visualizing everything from their browser. This is the reason why Dashboard UI became very popular. But despite the popularity, as I told you, the project announced its retirement. Now let me show you from the maintainer's point of view why they had to deprecate the project. This project is now archived and no longer maintained due to lack of active maintainers and contributors. The bitter truth. There are people who once contributed to the project. You can see there are 375 contributors to the project. But the bitter truth is that there are no active maintenance to the project. Anyways, you might have a question, but Abhishek, then what is the alternative? Is there anything that can make Kubernetes easy for the beginners? Definitely, there are alternatives. There are alternatives like Headlamp. There are alternatives like Lens. Good news is that Headlamp is very actively maintained. On top of that, Headlamp also moved to SIG user interface. SIG is basically special interest group. The Kubernetes community has some special interest groups like SIG networking, SIG UI, and Headlamp became part of SIG UI. That is, rest assured, this project will be actively maintained. The same thing with Gateway API as well. Gateway API also moved under SIG. Of course, towards the end of this video, I'll talk why Headlamp architecture is appreciated over the Kubernetes Dashboard UI architecture, why Headlamp was moved to Kubernetes SIG, and why it is easy for the open source contributors to contribute to Headlamp. But now, let's see how to install Headlamp for the Kubernetes cluster and how it can help you visualize the Kubernetes cluster. So I'll first set up a Kubernetes cluster. You can even go with clusters like EKS, you can go with clusters like AKS as well. But in my case, I'll set up a kind Kubernetes cluster. Kind create cluster, hyphen name, followed by, let me just call it as Headlamp demo. Perfect. Now we should have a cluster in less than a minute. I usually prefer kind for running clusters on my local because it can give you a Kubernetes cluster in minutes of time and you can spin up multiple Kubernetes clusters on your machine. Perfect. So we have the Headlamp demo cluster now. We have a Kubernetes cluster. Let's see how to set up Headlamp web user interface for this cluster. So just head to the Headlamp official documentation. So you have the introduction section. Along with that, you also have the installation section. Click on in cluster installation and go with using Helm. This is a very easy way. Just add the Helm repository. If you already have the repo, ignore that and move towards installing Headlamp. So I'm installing Headlamp in the kube system namespace. Any guesses why we are using kube system namespace? Anyways, so the reason why we are going with kube system namespace, because this is like a Kubernetes managed namespace, and usually you don't install your regular pods in this namespace. And it is most likely only your admins have access to this namespace. Cool. So let's install Headlamp. Make sure the pods are running. So just do kubectl get pods -n kube system. Okay, you can see the Headlamp pod is still in the container creating status. Let's wait for this pod to be in the running status. Cool. So now the Headlamp pod is also in the running status. Once it is in the running status, you have to perform an additional step. That is, you have to create a user. So you have to create a service account and you have to generate a token for the service account. You can do it later as well. For example, you can port forward the Headlamp pod. So I'm running kubectl port forward. The name of the service, I'll use 8080 port. So now Headlamp is running on my browser. I can just use localhost colon 8080. There we go. So we have headlamp running. But if you see, it is asking for ID token. How do you get this ID token? So you can check service account token related page. How do you generate? So you can create a service account. You can create an administrative service account and you can generate the token for the service account. Very simple. Just create a service account called Headlamp Admin. I'll stop the port forwarding. Okay. So we have a service account called Headlamp Admin now. And for this service account, grant the permissions. So make this service account administrator through the cluster role binding. Now finally, just create a token using kubectl create token command. You will have the token, copy the token and paste it on the browser. So I'll copy this. I'll rerun the kubectl port forward command. I'll go back to the browser, access localhost 8080 one more time. And now I will paste the ID token here. Authenticate. There you go. So now you can see the pods that are running on the cluster. You can see the namespaces on the cluster. You can check different workloads. Like what are the deployments that are running on my cluster? I can see the stateful sets, daemon sets, replica set. In fact, I can even use gateway API from here. I can create a new gateway API. I can also see the running gateway APIs on the cluster. So you can visualize and you can also perform actions here. Like create a pod, go ahead, provide your YAML file and get your pod running on the cluster. That's why it's super easy for the beginners. Now finally, we'll get back to the point. Why headlamp architecture is better when compared to Kubernetes Dashboard UI. So you might have this question, right? Abhishek, Kubernetes Dashboard UI also provides user interface. Headlamp also provides user interface. Then why Kubernetes Dashboard was not adopted by SIG UI? Why it does not have open source contributors? And why Headlamp will have more open source contributors? Very, very simple. Headlamp is designed with the mindset of Kubernetes plugins. So the core code of Headlamp is very small. On top of that, it used the concept of Kubernetes plugins. Just like Gateway API, Ingress codebase was very complex and it was with the native Kubernetes resource. So Gateway API emerged as an alternative because it started supporting everything as custom resource definitions. We learned that in our Gateway API video. Same concept for Headlamp as well. Kubernetes Dashboard UI was one big code base and contributing to Dashboard UI is difficult because even if you want to make a simple change, you have to start modifying the code base. You have to start understanding the complete code base. But Headlamp is designed with Kubernetes plugins architecture. Just like Visual Studio Code. Today, if you want to add a new plugin to Visual Studio Code, let's say you want to add a Kubernetes plugin, you want to add a Docker plugin, or you want to add a plugin related to your company, you don't need to know the Visual Studio Code. You only need to know how to develop a Visual Studio Code plugin, and you have to own this plugin. Same concept for Headlamp as well. If your company has a requirement, just go ahead, propose a plugin, develop the plugin and own the plugin. Let's say for some reason, you cannot continue to own the plugin. That's okay, right? The core component will still remain the same. Because there are no active contributors to this plugin, only this plugin will be deprecated, but the project will still remain alive. This is the reason why Headlamp will have active open source contributors in the future, because the core component of Headlamp is small when compared to the code base of Kubernetes Dashboard UI. If you are interested in learning more, just read about Kubernetes plugin development. I hope you found today's video informative. Just go ahead, install Headlamp for your cluster and start visualizing the Kubernetes clusters. See you all in the next video. Take care.